Anyway, back to work and
Yeah,
our meeting for today. And our two co-chairs
sure,
are here, so you all can take it away.
sure. The first thing on the agenda is the review of the final report template that James had started putting together. So I'll let James talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to double check, can everybody see my screen share? And so I will go through this quickly. So we had a template inside of our share folder that I'm sure each committee got. And what I've done is basically caught us up to speed on everything we've done so far. So as you know, first section is all admin, just who we are. Then it goes into our meetings. I've been able to capture all of our meeting videos. So thanks to Rachel and the team for logging everything. They're in a public facing YouTube channel, so they're easy to get to. I could easily put in a link for whether it's our agenda or our notes, but they're currently not in a public facing web portal. So I don't know how hard that'll be to get to if you're not in the committee. But it's easy to do if we decide to go down that road. So that's all pretty easy. The next portion is what I've kind of got out in highlighted in yellow are things that we still need to work on. And so the next portion is really public input. So once we start our town halls, get feedback from the surveys, that's what will go here. Whatever we glean that is relevant to our committee will kind of go here as sort of public concerns, what they're interested in. So we're just going to start that with our first town hall here at the end of the month. Then we focus into the nuts and bolts of what we focused on during our year in this committee. And so we have our breakout of topics that we started the year with. So this isn't necessarily complete. I've got a couple in red that, at the beginning of the year, we said, hey, we may look at these and some we may not. So those might drop off, but it's basically just a summary of the topics that drove us in the beginning. And then we talked about what the state law, what North Carolina state law says, as well as what the Board of Elections guidance is from their portal. And so basically what should happen, what right looks like. And then we kind of compare what right looks like to what we saw during our year. And we list out our findings and our recommendations. So again, that has to be done because we haven't really started that portion yet. And then we finished it up at the end of our format is our resource list, which is still growing. People can still put in resources in the document, and I'll just copy and paste them as that grows. But that is pretty much where we are so far. We're already at 5 pages and not even probably halfway through the material that we'll start filling in once we have, the public input and the law side of the house. So I'll pause there. If any questions, feedback on kind of where we are, but I think we're in a good place. Now it's just kind of filling in the blanks.
That is very well organized. And I'll just add that we do have 2 town hall meetings coming up in Cullowhee and Winston-Salem on April 30th and May 7th. And we can also pull from, a survey from 2 years ago if we need. But we've got more coming up in August and September. So for the draft that's due at the end of June, we'll only have had 2 town halls, but will tell us something about, public concerns at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll probably give us some insights into gaps that maybe we didn't think about that we can look for in the remaining part of the year. So I think
We should also be getting some polling data from Elon, Meredith, and the others that are doing polling.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Steve, that's what I got.
All right, good. Thanks. That looks good. And I think it's got clearly identified kind of holes and pieces that need to be filled in, and that can guide the agendas for the future meetings. Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is our visitor. So let me do just sort of a very brief introduction to him. Charlie Collicutt is the Director of Elections with Guilford County. And he has a lot of experience both in sort of the practice and procedures at the county level and the policies that guide that. The other thing that I'll point out, and I will always point it out whenever it's possible, is that he is a UNC Greensboro alum. I believe twice over with 2 different degrees, but he's going to give us a basic overview of the way things work at the county level, how the elections are run, and how machines are maintained and stored and kept secure. And then we'll follow that up with a Q&A time. So Charlie, over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I went to UNCG once as an undergrad, and then I just couldn't get enough, and 10 years later went back for I was one of those adults that go back late for a master's degree when with kids everywhere running around, and it feels like the other students there were the same age as my kids. But no, I appreciate it. I've been the director of elections for 10 years, but I've been with the Guilford County Board of Elections for 20 years now. Started out really unpaid volunteer in the warehouse moving boxes till they decided to start paying me, and then been promoted along the way. And so I've been doing this for a long time, and I think that what I want to really kind of to touch on is that there is this kind of, for security, election security, this marriage of the highly technical behind the scenes computer technology aspect of it, cybersecurity, but then there's this practical physical stuff that we do: chain of custody, badge access, two-person usage of certain equipment, which I think sometimes people focus on one of those two issues and not both of them combined and how they work together. I'm only one piece of that puzzle. But basically, I'll give a quick rundown, and then I think the questions that I've seen and that I anticipate, I think are going to flesh a lot of this out. So I'm not going to get into too much detail initially, but I'm kind of cribbing some notes here from something that I did for a group that was called The Life of a Ballot, and it was a group of people that were very skeptical, but I didn't have to get into the technology too much, and that made them feel good that I wasn't talking over their heads. But basically, here in Guilford County, we create our own ballots. We create our own programming. In North Carolina, you can have the vendor do it, or you can do it yourself, and we're self-programming. We create those ballots, that programming, but we do get a certified vendor to do the actual printing of the ballots. But understand that those ballots that we create, there's kind of a handshake between the ballots, the coding in that ballot, and the coding on our scanners, tabulators, the DS200 or what have you, where they're only going to work together. Machines, is I'm sure that most of should know at this point, there's no internet access. They're not accessible that way. We are programming the old-fashioned way. I'm taking an encrypted USB with my programming, putting it in the machine, programming it that way. No network or anything like that. We do a pretty robust test vote process with a test deck of pre-marked ballots. With a pattern that I know, we'll take some familiar patterns, maybe a 1-2, 2-4, 1-2-3, and my staff, we will what's the term? We'll salt that deck with other votes that only we know internally, or only that I know how they're going to be. Me and a couple of staff members, and staff will go take those ballots and run them on every scanner that we're going to use in this election, plus backups. When that's done, we're going to read those results. We're going to look at the tapes. We're going to run them all the way through our internal election-aware processing, all the way up into the state system for their test vote that they do, and ensure and check off and make sure that they're accurately reading what we want them to read. So that's the voting process, the beginning of it. With ballots, we have this whole other section of physical processing. But we send all of our equipment out, ballots in our ballot boxes, the voting systems. We send it up in locked area, in locked cages for early voting, locked ballot boxes. And we use a pretty good system here in Guilford of tamper evidence seals, where we're documenting what was the tamper evidence seal on multiple places, on the ballots, on the ports, on the voting equipment, on the doors where ballots would go, on the scanner lid that would be lifted. Tamper evidence seals that are documented at our warehouse. The poll workers can document those seals election morning, and actually document it, not just check off, but document it. If they have to reseal at the end of the night, they can reseal, redocument those seals, and make sure that what we have introduced for voting is what we what we did in our warehouse, what we put out there in our warehouse. So we would be aware if any of those things were accessed or tampered with. Voters vote, and I think that this thing that I think that a lot of people that might feel that ballots are getting introduced into the system failed this very small hill to surpass is that we track every ballot. Not that it's not that that we know how you voted, but I know 500 votes were cast, 500 votes on the machine. I think that's such a simple thing that we do, that we document and check off post election and during the day. It's such an important thing. And again, at the end of the night, we're not uploading anything to a network, no modems or anything like that. We are hand delivering election materials, encrypted, the encrypted sticks with the vote totals and the ballots in boxes where we've again put tamper evidence seals, documented, so that bipartisan team of precinct officials, they're going to seal up their materials. They are going to, as a bipartisan collective, a bipartisan team, sign off that we put this tamper evidence seal on these election materials, and we're going to document that seal number. It comes back into my office on election night in their cars. We pull it out, and we on site we document that tamper evidence seal on those ballots, on those results, is what that bipartisan team certified when before those ballots left the polling place. And then we run the results in election night. We are running them from the electronic tabulation. The ballots stay sealed up. The only time we will then unseal those ballots is when we do the state mandated audit, the hand-to-eye audit, which we can get into later, and open them up for recounts, or if there's a protest or something like that. And then that's what we do. That's, I know I've said a lot, but it's a series of physical locking, physical bipartisan teams doing things. And even though a tamper evidence seal looks like a little flimsy piece of tape, they can be so powerful to demonstrate during the process and after the fact that that lid, that port, that door, that lid of ballots of the voting machine was never opened up from the last time it was checked in with the bipartisan team to the office, or vice versa. So that's what I do, and we've been pumping up and really really trying to improve our chain of custody over the last couple of years. We've always done chain of custody. We've always had these processes, but the next step is, how do we make sure that we're able to show that we do these processes? It's doesn't mean anything if the chief judge says, yep, everything was fine, the seals were all fine. Okay, well, now let's document it and you sign it. And so then, there's a documentation of these chain of custody processes that we've always been doing. So I think that's a big push that we've been doing. So that's kind of my summary. Steve, I don't know if you want me to keep going or if you guys want to ask me some questions.
No, I think that's a good overview. There were a couple of things in the questions that I wanted to bring up and get you to fill us in on the information. So one was about facilities. So not all voting locations are owned by the county. They're owned by, some of them are owned by, there's one at UNCG, there's one at NCA&T. So how do you coordinate security, and particularly if you have to leave the machines overnight?
Right. Yeah, we do. And so that is a challenge. And we're using, we're a county office, but we are using, like you said, other organizations. We try not to use too much private in Guilford County. We're using public facilities, rec centers, but that's still, they're still physically accessible. So what we do is we have these, they're about $800 each, but we have these giant security cages that we lock everything up in physically with a big master lock and tamper evidence seals over that. In that goes the laptop computers that we use, because one, they've got voter data, but two, they're expensive, unused ballots, other election materials. But the ballots themselves that have been voted, so unused ballots we keep locked up under lock and key. Voted ballots, those are removed every night and brought into the Board of Elections office. So, and again, using a series of documenting of sealing and those kind of things. So we don't have to worry about the unused, the voted ballots overnight, but the DS200 is there. So we do a shutdown. We don't close polls, but we do a shutdown process on that where you would have to use a password to access it the next morning. And then we also again put a series on different places on that where the ballots came out of, the lid internally and externally that you would use to access the DS200 scanning unit itself. We use tamper evidence seals on that, along with the lock and key that are built into the system. So that is a challenge, but it's a series of a mix of this physical lock and key, tamper evidence seals, and again removing the ballots from the facility.
Great. There are a few other things on there, but instead of me sort of taking all the time, let me put it out there to the rest of the group and see what questions they have. Mary Ellen.
Yep.
Mary Ellen, you're muted. Oh. Didn't quite get it. You are unmuted for like half a second. There you go.
Got it. Charlie, in terms of what you just said about the voted ballots being brought back to the Board of Elections every night, what is the chain of command like that? Who is doing that? How many people are involved? How is it secured?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is one of those mixes of logistics and security, and how do we find that balance? There's a point where we do need to go home at the end of the night when all the supplies are brought in. So what we have is, and this is similar to election night, but we have the boxes, the ballots, they're put into secure box, and we again use tamper evidence, lock the boxes in with a tamper evidence seal also, and we document that. The team of early voting officials signs off that this is the seal number applied. So at one of the site supervisor or one of our part-time employees will go out, they'll go out and get it, or the supervisor, chief judge, will bring them in from the site to our office, to our full-time
Just one
staff.
person?
Yes, just one person. And they bring it in, and then when they drop it off, the team here in the Board of Elections office signs off that seal that was signed off on by the team at the site is the same seal that's still on that ballot box. And then we put that ballot box in the vault, and we can follow that seal with its unique number. We can follow that from what the early voting team did at the site to our office in the vault, and then when we show that, if we need to show that to the Board of Elections, or if we need to audit, or if we need to recount. So we do have that documented chain of custody, that seal at every point has been the same. If we required them to have multiple people in the cars, you would get in, there's logistical issues to that. They want to go home after a long day too. And I think that we are documenting enough that box has never been opened up.
And I'm unfamiliar with what a tamper evident seal looks like.
Mm.
And none of this is for me. I have total faith in what you're doing, but I do talk to people who don't.
Right.
And I would like to be in a position to explain to them why they should.
Right. I think that, I don't know if I've got one laying around. I see. But at the end of the meeting, I'll try to find one and show you what it is. But what basically, to sum it up, is it's a piece of, kind of a thick piece of tape almost, that when you peel it, it leaves a residue. But also there's a unique number on that almost a randomized number that you can document and follow, that seal that has never been removed or tampered with, cut, ripped off, sliced, whatever, because you can follow its unique number through the process that holds the whole lid closed.
Thanks.
Who else has
So
a
I had
question?
somebody actually ask this at one of our meetings. What if, well, there are two things. Can you hack a flash drive? And the second one is, what if someone who's driving it back has an accident and the flash drive is lost?
That's great. Two great questions. So that the hacking of the flash card, I'll defer to maybe somebody better versed in the computer science of all this. But they are not just an off the shelf product, not the ones that we use for the system that we have, our ESNS system. I can't speak to other systems, but I'm sure it is possible. But then there's the fact that you would have to access them, and I keep them locked in a vault when not in use, and when they're in the voting system, they're locked within that system. And again, using tamper evident seals over the port or the door, the little flap where you would access that. So somebody else might want to answer the can it be hacked? My answer is perhaps, but how are you going to get it to hack it? That's my physical security answer. And your other question was, what happens if somebody gets in a wreck? And this is interesting. We just did a tabletop exercise with the whole state was involved with their entire emergency management across the state, and that was brought up. What happens? And there's a whole aspect of how do we get this stuff back? And there is so many it depends. I'm going to get to the final answer here in a second, but there are little things to think about. If they get into a fender bender, we can get them there. They can grab their supplies, jump in a police car, they'll get escorted in. I've got a sheriff's department on beck and call to do that. If it's a big fiery crash and things start to get burned up, you start to get into little other issues here. If the person, and this is out, not to get morbid, but if the person dies, it's a major deal because the crash investigators have to go weigh everything in that car. So we may not get that stuff back for a long time. So here's what we do in Guilford County. Well, one, all the ESNS products, there is the election is backed up in that DS200 that's still at the site. So we could go pull the results from the backup. Two, if the ballots are okay, we can read the ballots. But if they were burned up in a fiery crash, so we've got the backup data in the DS200 that we can pull. But we also do something here in Guilford County just to give ourselves a second thing to back up against. When the tapes print out at the end of the night, there's the master result tape that gets signed by all the precinct officials. We print 2 copies. One copy comes in with that chief judge on election night. The other copy, another judge takes it home, and we provide them a postage paid envelope, and they stick it in the envelope, seal it up, it's postage paid, stick it in the mail, and it comes back to our office. So we could then reconcile the backup data with that secondary tape and have something, if we couldn't get the originals from a crash site.
Just to let you know, Mecklenburg County does the same thing. When Michael Dickerson told me that they make a copy and they put it in the mail, I was like, wow, that's a lot of backup.
Yeah, and that is something that I was going to touch on later was the peer-to-peer network of what we talk about, and I'm sure that's something that my the former director here, my predecessor, and Michael Dickerson, they were buddies, so I'm sure it came out of some discussion, and that's why a lot of us do the same policies, just because of that peer-to-peer network.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, and Steve, please come over the top if I misstate anything from a technology standpoint. I have yet to see a piece of technology that, if given enough time, skills, and access, is crackable. Every piece of technology is. That said, these encrypted flash drives are very difficult for several reasons. Number one, they're encrypted, which means if you need to have it in your possession for several minutes to hours to break the encryption, which means it's been stolen. Number two, you got to have it actually, physically in your hands. because there's no Wi-Fi on these things. You can't digitally do it from across the room. And so there's safeguards in place to make it very hard to do. But big picture, from election machines to whatever tech is in the room, nothing is not hackable at some point. But it's the time, the resources, and the access needed to do it in a secure environment so that nobody else sees you, which makes it very difficult.
Yeah, I'll add to that, just sort of from the technical side, that the drives themselves, the little pieces that are kind of floating around that might be easy to grab and do something with, those would be very, very, very difficult. I don't use the word impossible in what I do, but very, very, very difficult to hack. The place that you would do it would be the endpoint that's programming that thing in the first place. And if those are physically controlled, more so than the little, flash drives that are floating around, then it's a very secure system. What other questions do people have?
And just to touch on that, I think that's where people sometimes focus on, is it hackable, but don't get into, like you guys are both saying, could you get your hands on one? Or if you got your hands on one, can you get into it and then introduce it back in? Those are the things where you've got to look at both of these things together when you look at these probabilities or abilities for things to happen.
Actually, I should probably go back, and I gave the impression that these flash drives are just floating around. They're portable and easily handed from hand to hand, but they're generally not in the system because the physical possession is controlled. So I didn't want to leave that phrase out there. What other questions?
Building on that last question about flash drives and some of the technology that exists now, where do you see elections or the administration of elections going in the next 10 years? And I guess what needs to change in the next 10 years? Not just response to the current pressure and current questions that might be going on about election integrity, but just from your perspective as someone that lives and breathes this, what needs to change and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I've been here, like I said, I've been in elections for 20 years. And so it's been really interesting to see the change from where we were in 2002, 2004, going from this big push for full electronic voting to this paper ballot system. And I think what we're going to see is, for an election voting system, I think we're going to see somewhat more of a path that we're kind of on to a hybridization of the two, where I think that you're seeing it with the express vote. I know it's got problems, it's got its controversies. I think we're going to see more digital interface or online interface perhaps, but that allows the printing of a full face ballot. I think that's somewhere where we're going to go, more likely, but I don't really know. I don't know. I never thought we would have been here. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, would we be here? I would have not been able to answer it. So that's a hard answer. I think that's from the voting technology part. I think, from a, if you want to get into voter registration and that kind of administration, again, I don't know, because I thought that we were going to be going down a path of really good state to state data sharing, and that has gotten politicized a little bit, and we're not seeing it the way that where I thought it would be. And so I think that a couple of times I've been kind of shocked of where we ended up if I look back in hindsight. So it's hard for me to look forward. I know that's not a good answer, but that's
I'm asking to predict the
now.
future. So, that's not exactly the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
I have another kind of systems question. in terms of the trust that obviously we have in each of those persons who are driving these things back. When you hire people, even the temporary workers, what kind of security clearance do they get?
None, and they are at this time in North Carolina, as you know, the poll workers are, or the early voting workers now are appointees. They are nominated by their party, appointed by the Board of Elections. So there isn't a security check, and actually there's a law that requires that election officials get fingerprinted, background checked, but there's an exemption to the poll workers. And I think that's logistical as much as anything. But it's one of those things where somebody even with a clean criminal record or clean background check could do something malicious, or somebody with a horrible criminal record that has done a lot of bad things in their life could end up being your best most person to do this. So it's hard to predict human behavior, and I don't always know that a background check is the best way to predict what they'll do in the future.
Charlie, what kind of training are these appointed poll workers given? And is it standardized throughout the state, or is it what you do here and what Mecklenburg does there?
It is not standardized through the state. The state does produce some materials. I don't always like their materials, but what we do here in Guilford County is every poll worker that works they are given, well, with photo ID now we're doing about 3 hours of kind of general nuts and bolts training, and that's with somebody that we a trainer that we have on staff. They all run through those nuts and bolts trainings, but then in the week before the election, I see them personally, where I do a big training in our big 200-person auditorium that we have on site, that we share, and that's me. And that's a secondary training, which is not as much nuts and bolts, but it's more the subjective stuff, the last minute reminders, the things that I think are important. So on average, I would say the Guilford County poll workers are going through, at this point with photo ID, probably 4.5 to 5 hours of training prior to each election. And I think that's on the high side if you're going to look at the other counties.
Okay, and if you're saying poll workers, do these same people work in early voting and on election day, both?
There's a mix. So the early voting officials are probably going through a unique 4 to 5 hours of training for themselves, broken up over a couple meetings, and also dependent on their roles. If you're just out there to help do traffic and stuff like that, then you won't go through as much training. But the higher level supervisors and people that are changing addresses and doing same day registrations, they'll go through 4 to 5 hours of training. The election day workers are going to go through 4 to 5 hours of training just for election day. So if you work both, you're probably going to do about 10 hours of training.
So you actually do 2 different trainings.
Yes.
And the poll observers now, with their new expanded duties, is there any formalized training for them?
No, that's on their party to train them the way that they want to. I provide the documentation that the State Board of Elections has given us. The State Board's written a really good memo on observers. They've put out, I would call it a one sheet, but it's a front and back. You may have seen it, kind of a bullet point of what they can and can't do with some frequently asked questions. It's a great document, and I print that out, or I send that to the parties to hopefully distribute. And when they give us the names of observers, and when they do that, they'll typically give us their email address. And if I can do it, I'll send a mass email out to those observers saying, hey, your party appointed you to go. And when you go, here's some guidelines from the state board. So I email them that. Whether they look at it or not is a different question.
Now, I'll just follow up, Charlie. So I'm a poll worker here in Wake County. I've worked the last couple of election cycles, and so our training is a little different. We do sort of the initial mass training, which is like 3 to 4 hours, maybe a little more if it's your first year doing it, kind of in a big auditorium, and they run through all of our processes. I've worked both early elections and I've done election day. And it is a little, I've done training for both, and they're a little different. And then usually based on who your judges are or your supervisors, they will generally do a more localized session at your polling site with just that team, maybe a day before, the night before during setup. You'll come in and your team of 12 to 8 to 12 to 20 people will come in and walk through the steps for your, because every polling site is a little bit different. Some are small, some are huge. But the training's pretty good. I've been through a couple cycles. It covers down on just about everything, and you'll realize once you get there. I'm fairly new to this, done it a couple years. I'm sitting next to a person who's done it for 25. So it's kind of a shared experience and done pretty well. But it is very different. Like, Charlie's secondary, where you go in and you take everybody. We don't do that in Wake County. So it's kind of for the new one like me, it's still kind of overwhelming. I feel very responsible, like I'm going to make a mistake. But I've learned now that I've been through it a couple of times. It's done very well. There's books that sit there. Every little problem that comes up, it's in the book. And so I've always been very impressed with the training and the materials they have on site as we go through the elections. It's done pretty well.
Yeah, and I think that's a place where the physical space you have for it, the resources that the county dedicates to it, can all impact that. I like to get in front of them. When we do training, we're doing some somewhat smaller groups, just because of the space that we have for so many trainings. And I don't have time. I don't do all the trainings, obviously, but I do 5 big ones in the night where we cycle 200 people through every night. And that's where I like to get into the stuff like with observers, there's this new written warning and you can kick them out. And I don't want my trainer teaching that. That's me, because that's big and there's subjective stuff in there. What is electioneering? I know it's going to get a million questions. I like to get up there when I have as many people in the room as possible and say, here it is. When I talk about photo ID, they've gotten the nuts and bolts on how they're going to conduct photo ID. But I get up there and say, if you have any questions, here is what light most favorable to the voter. Here's what, the 4 corners. Here's what these things mean. That's what I like to do. I was doing that when I got into it, and so I've kind of kept that as my thing. And we do go out there on Mondays. Also, the workers they call their contact. They go to the church, they go to the school, and they set it all up. And they're supposed to talk about the important things. I don't know if they always do, but yeah, getting everything up on its legs and making sure that they get their signs up. That's important to do on Monday.
So you,
Charlie, I'm in Salisbury, Rowan County. We had one little glitch during the primary election that we just went through. It turned out, as Gen X would say, to be a nothing burger, and it was our Board of Elections is in, as Steve said, a lease facility, and it was on a non-voting day. The front door was unlocked, and people were going in thinking they could vote, early voting, and but there was nothing happened wrong. All the ballots were secure, et cetera, machines secure, that kind of thing like that. In this most recent primary, Guilford County, did you have any glitches, learning opportunities that you came across?
Something that's somewhat of the inverse of that issue. We had, look, I'll tell you, great precinct officials, great workers will do awesome for years and years and years, and then do something so dumb, and you're like, what was that? And sometimes something that's never been an issue crops up as an issue. And we had a real bad one this time with people locking their keys inside of the cage that locks everything up. So we had a couple of times we were flying out there. I drove one out, and in this primary, nothing ever got delayed. It would have caused delays had it been November and people ready to go. We had things like that occurred, and we run into issues where, and they're correctable in early voting, which is nice, but the wrong ballot style can be given out, even though we have lots of checks and balances for that. It happens. Um, the classic things of a father and son getting switched in the system. We have those all the time. They're fixable issues. So whether it became something, it didn't, but it could have, yeah, without us being alert. But that's the funny thing. I see I get what you're saying, and I can see how that can happen. Um, and we don't think about that. We think about getting in the door and and not opening up late. And we've had on election day, thank goodness, nothing longer than 15 minutes, but we have had issues with our churches, or the assistant principal or the custodian not getting there. We've got 165 precincts on election day. In early voting, we've used up to 25 early voting sites. The logistics of that is something I think people don't understand, of that network of communication with these sites. And how do we delegate it to members of my staff, to kind of our roving middle management folks out there at the polls, to the chief judges actually contacting the pastor. And my thing is, you may talk to the pastor all the time, but ask him who's really going to open the door on Tuesday morning. It's not going to be him. It's going to be the secretary. So get somebody's cell phone, get all the cell phones you want, because I've woken plenty of people up out of bed and said, get out there and open those doors. We don't want to have to, though.
The problem was in Guilford County was things being locked up too tight rather than unlocked by accident. So you talked about the training in Guilford County, and James talked a little bit about Wake. Those sounded good. Those are big counties, a lot of resources, a lot of experienced people. And it sounded like it was mostly put onto the counties. I don't know what the state provides, and I'm particularly curious about the smaller, less well-resourced counties that don't have kind of the depth of experience that we have.
Yeah, I think the state does provide materials. I know they've tried videos and stuff in the past, and it's so hard because they want to be so well produced, but the laws change so fast, and there's always been this push for uniformity. And I can't get uniformity within the precincts in my own county because of the different sizes or experiences. So it's hard to do it across the state. I worry about the small counties, because if you lose one person, you lose a lot of experience. But on the flip side, they don't have a lot of precincts. They don't have a lot of poll workers. Where the ones that concern me for all of this are the counties that are moving from being small counties to medium counties. Those are the ones that worry me, because they've not had time for their staffing and their position counts to catch up to their growth. So that's the ones that worry me. You go from, with a staff of 3, you can train 4 precincts. But what happens if now you go to 12 precincts, but you still only have three staff members? Those are the ones that start to worry me. So it's small counties, yes, but it's the medium counties that I worry about. And really that comes down to resources, where the director has to decide, I can't do the trainings. I have to have somebody else to do trainings. Well, I can't have this person because they're doing absentee ballots. I can't have this person because they're doing registration. So how do we do it? That's where it starts to get tough. It's who does it, who trains it, who develops the handbook, who does these things, because I do my training that I do, but I'm not, I'm not spending hours and that. I have somebody, it is their job for 2 weeks. They are training 9 hours a day for about two weeks. How do you do that? And it's not just getting the state can give all the handbooks, the guidance, videos. It's who do you have? Who is your face to face with those poll workers to translate all this information to them? And that's where that divide of, we're a small county, we can do it all ourselves, to, oh crap, I got to bring in extra help, seasonal help, or hire somebody just to do training. Those questions.
Great. Let me ask one more question and then I'll be quiet again. I'm sort of curious. I imagine in your role, you get an earful sometimes of from the general public of things that they are suspicious of or don't trust. I'm wondering if you see any themes with that, or if there are things that surprised you that might need to be addressed at some point.
You know, that's hard because I do. I mean, I get the questions of the big one that we've for 20 years is, how do I know my vote was counted? And there's this point of trusting that all these things that are in place have to have an impact at some point. But I think that there's also this that I'm starting to hear, the trend that I'm hearing more and more is, you know, I can tell you everything that we do, and the goalpost just moves and moves and moves. And then ultimately, when you drill down, there's just this distrust that I'm going to put up the right results, and it's not a system thing with some people. It's a me thing, and when you really get down to it. And when I would encounter those people in years past, I could laugh and I could say, you know, I love my job. I like my benefits. I'm never going to do anything to jeopardize getting fired or getting put in jail. And but now, you know, I was shocked. I said that to somebody and he said, well, I would go to jail for that. And I said, oh gosh. So, you know, it's changed, and it's just the distrust, just the goalpost of distrust just move. You know, you solve this, there's no motives. Well, what about this? Well, there's this chain of custody. Well, what about this? And ultimately it just, there's, I don't know how you satisfy the people that are just going to find distrust to wherever they are along the way. So, you know, I can point out contradictions. I can point out, you know, the person that wants a receipt, and it's, you know, and I can point out, you know, why things why or wouldn't work to prove your point. But it ultimately, if you're lucky, you just agree to disagree at the end of a long phone conversation.
It's our town halls that's going to fix it all.
That's
We're
right.
going to convince every voter to trust the system.
Actually, when we did the virtual town hall, we had a couple of people who were very, very skeptical, who were on, they were like filling the chat with all kinds of questions and asides. But at the end of 90 minutes, after hearing all the professionals, one of them said, now I can see that North Carolina is not the problem.
Well,
So,
okay, good for us.
yeah.
It's the statistics that, you know, it's the other guys that are the problem. I like my guy, but the other guys are the problem. And you know,
Yep.
that sounds cynical or whatever, but I guess if everybody thinks their guy's okay and it's the other, everyone else is a problem, then you know, I guess we're doing all right. But yeah, and a lot of people, I can't talk and they get it, and when they talk to me and they realize I'm a human being, I'm a person, not this faceless machine, then they're okay. But not everybody.
Yeah, I think we discovered that in our town halls, that there were, you know, there were always a couple people who you were just not going to convince when the deniers came. But a lot of people who were just curious or confused or just moved here were convinced when they got real information from real people who were doing it every day for 20 years. You know, real information did move the needle for them. So you just got to hope that you do enough of that, that you all get less harassment.
Yeah, and you know, the ones that I hear from, it's not that many. You know, it really isn't. But I have changed what I do, and this is unfortunate, but you know, I have to carve out as we lead. I know we're going to do it going into this next one. Is I am having to carve out calendar time to call back people or to deal with these questions, and so it takes away time from my election administration. And now I've got a great staff, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you're a small county, how do I spend even an hour talking to people about this when I've got to do training, or I've got to go program machines, or I've got voter registration or absentee ballots? So again, it's one where I worry the small or medium one folks that don't have the time in their schedules to talk to these people when there's other stuff. And we're not all experts on it. I can do this. I'm good at this. I've been doing it long enough, but not all of us have been doing it long enough to talk about this or explain it without, or to say it right. I guess that's the way to do it. Way to say it.
All right, so let's do a last call for questions here. Anybody have any last questions?
I think it would be great, Charlie, if you could, you don't have to do it right now, but if there are things that could be improved, we know funding is always one of them. It's that fine line between saying we got everything handled, we're doing fine, but we could use more support because, we need extra backup, whatever. Apart from that, if there are things that could be improved that you've heard about from other states, feel free to send that to, to me or to James or Steve, and, just let us have your thoughts, because we are trying to say that we have a good system, but if there are things we could do a little better, we want to have that in our final report.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Saw that Scott popped back in and unmuted. So you have something, Scott?
Sure. Charlie, great job, great presentation. I was an election administrator for 30 years and good friend of George Gilbert, who you may know.
I know George.
North Carolina and Guilford County are lucky to have you and your colleagues and your devotion and dedication to what you do. I hope all of you were listening to not just the professionalism and technical knowledge, but Charlie's commitment and belief in what he does. And he represents, I think, election officials, not just in North Carolina, but around the country. And the challenges that he described that he's having are similar to jurisdictions across the country, large and small. And the world has changed. It used to be, and Charlie, you may concur with this, that when you take the time to explain and make yourself available, that the doubters eventually would leave, maybe not satisfied, but understanding what the reality is of an election, and because they were acting in good faith. There tends to be an absence of good faith on the part of a lot of folks nowadays who are doubters. So those who are skeptics, many of them are very sincere and very really want to know and understand. But there are some that are not acting in good faith and will never be satisfied and always seek to disrupt. So keep that in mind, given what your goal and objectives are here as a commission and in your report, that there's some people who just aren't going to buy it. But that doesn't mean that you failed, and it doesn't mean that guys like Charlie, who can't explain it well enough for everybody to walk away, are doing anything wrong. There's just some folks, and it will, I expect the pendulum will switch and go back, but keep in mind that not everybody out there is acting in good faith when they challenge in election processes, and those who are actually doing it. And it's really unfortunate, Charlie, that things get personal sometimes. You hinted a couple of things you said. Let me know that it's been that way for you. But anyway, good job. keep it up, and good luck in this upcoming cycle, and stay brave.
Thanks, Scott. And George is my mentor. He hired me to come here when I was 22 years old. So yeah, so I worked under him for a long time, and so fun guy, interesting guy. But no, I appreciate those words, and you're so right. There are so many people that even if we walk away agreeing to disagree, they're satisfied. They said what they wanted to say. But you're right. There is a subset that are never going to be satisfied, and that's in all walks of life. There's always going to be a subset that are never going to be satisfied. Sometimes because of a different goal that they have, or sometimes they're just not going to be. And I agree. We got you guys, and we all have to figure this out for the ones that it can help, and not get frustrated or derailed by the ones we can't.
All right, what do you think, everybody? James, is it a wrap?
I think we've exceeded the standard. Charlie, again, thanks so much for your insights. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you all. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks for all you do.
All right, everybody, we will meet in approximately a month for our next meeting, and maybe we can send that draft document around a little bit and make sure we identify the pieces we need to fill in, and decide what we're going to do next month accordingly.
Yeah, thanks for putting that in the format. Y'all are making great progress. I think it's going to be a great report.
Great.
Good.
All right, thanks, everybody. I guess that's it. Take
Good.
care.
Good
Thanks.
night, everybody.